Justice Department recently opened access to a large number of previously withheld documents concerning the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. These unredacted files were made available for review by selected members of Congress today. Right after viewing them, Representatives Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna shared their immediate reactions. Listen to what they described. One thing that struck me deeply was spotting the names of at least 6 individuals who remain hidden behind redactions, names that, by appearing in these records, suggest possible serious involvement or wrongdoing. Even more troubling, a significant portion of the material stays concealed, leaving major gaps in what was shown to us. Joining the discussion now is Democratic Representative Jared Moskowitz from Florida, a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, you had the chance to examine portions of these records earlier today. Let's start with some background on the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The department chose to grant limited access to certain unredacted portions connected to Jeffrey Epstein for a select group of lawmakers. Among those who reviewed them were Representatives Massie and Khanna, and both voiced strong reservations. Massie pointed out that he noticed at least 6 names kept secret through redactions, individuals whose presence in the files likely places them in a precarious legal position. Khanna emphasized that, despite the disclosures, much remains blacked out and unclear even in the viewed sections. Representative Moskowitz, also from Florida and part of the Judiciary Committee, reviewed some of the material himself. But before we dive deeper into that, let's shift to another major development involving former President Trump. For years, he has repeatedly insisted that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from him. You hear it at every campaign stop, in interviews, and across his posts on Truth Social late into the night. The story always centers on widespread cheating, manipulated voting equipment, and counterfeit ballots. Now a federal judge has issued a firm order, essentially challenging those assertions by requiring proof. This goes beyond rhetoric. The judge directed the FBI to turn over the actual ballots confiscated in Georgia during 2020. The genuine paperwork long held under tight security, without heavy censorship. Trump and his circle are clearly unsettled by this. The rules permitted the Justice Department to protect only the identities of victims and survivors, along with details that could harm active federal probes. Congressman, based on what you reviewed, did those protections align with the guidelines, and what specifically stood out as worrisome to you? Thank you for having me. First, I want to express hope that the family of Savannah's mother sees her safe return soon. To describe the process, today I arrived at the Justice Department and took the elevator to the 10th floor. That entire level appeared deserted, no staff present. Inside a room sat 4 terminals set up for viewing. They provided us with a detailed 24-page manual explaining exactly how to operate the system to access the files. While the department restricted redactions strictly to victim privacy and ongoing case security, plenty still requires careful examination. So, Congressman, in your view, did the blacked out sections adhere to legal standards? What elements gave you pause? Thanks again for being here. And again, best wishes for a quick and safe resolution for Savannah's loved ones. I entered the Justice Department building, went straight to the 10th floor, which felt eerily empty. No one around. The viewing area had exactly 4 computers. Surprisingly, they supplied a full 24-page instruction booklet just to browse the documents. Here's the core update. A federal judge has ordered the FBI to disclose files linked to their 2020 seizure of ballots from Fulton County, Georgia. The release must happen by this Tuesday, February 10th, meaning within days. The ruling stressed that excessive or unjustified redactions won't stand. The American people have a right to understand the full picture of events. For anyone long persuaded that fraud decided the election, this seems like a breakthrough moment, proof at last of the irregularities Trump has highlighted endlessly. The real story could finally surface. Yet there's an important twist. Rather than welcoming the disclosure, Trump's legal team appears rattled. They're working urgently to block or limit what's revealed. If the files truly exposed massive wrongdoing, one would expect them to push hard for openness. Their resistance tells its own story. Georgia's 2020 outcome has lingered in controversy. Trump fell short by roughly 12,000 votes, a narrow margin amid millions cast, and Biden prevailed legitimately. Still, Trump refused to concede. Instead, he contacted the state's top election official, urging him to locate just enough votes to reverse the result. He leaned on officials, arranged alternate slates of electors despite the certified outcome, and alleged hidden suitcases of unlawful ballots processed away from observers. Soon, the public will learn precisely what the FBI found when it investigated those allegations. It's striking, really. Trump has spent years as the central figure driving this account, convincing millions the contest was rigged while portraying federal agencies as biased opponents. Now, the very investigative materials, the ballots, the reports, the evidence gathered on those Georgia incidents are headed for release. Should those materials undermine his fraud accusations, revealing exaggeration or invention by his side, the impact could be profound. This pattern extends far beyond one state. The broader election story shows signs of unraveling. If Georgia's claims prove unfounded, it naturally prompts scrutiny of similar assertions elsewhere. The question becomes unavoidable. If the narrative around Georgia doesn't hold, how much of the rest was built on shaky ground? His return to power rested heavily on the belief that the 2020 result was illegitimate. Consider the moment. Trump sits again in the Oval Office during his second presidency, advancing his priorities. At the same time, a court compels the unveiling of records that might establish he misrepresented the 2020 outcome from day one. It's remarkable that someone propelled back to leadership on that very issue now faces potential evidence dismantling it. Get ready. This development promises significant shifts. Let's examine the details more closely because the layers here run deep and the stakes remain exceptionally high. In 2020, Georgia's margin was slim. About 12,000 votes separated the candidates out of millions. Biden edged ahead by that amount. For Trump, who carried the state 4 years earlier, accepting defeat proved impossible. He persuaded himself and a vast following that only cheating explained it. He leveled serious charges. Secret counting of hidden ballot containers, votes cast by deceased individuals, tampered devices, repeated scanning of identical ballots. He declared the entire system compromised. Beyond statements, he phoned Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and explicitly asked him to find 11,780 votes, enough to overtake Biden. That conversation exists on tape, capturing the direct appeal to alter certified results. That alone sparked outrage. Yet his associates went further, assembling unauthorized electors claiming to represent Georgia despite the official tally favoring Biden. After all this time, the FBI's findings on those ballots will finally emerge. Understand that federal agents do not seize physical ballots lightly. Doing so signals probable cause, sufficient basis to secure and examine potential evidence. Yet the FBI never publicly validated widespread fraud. No confirmation emerged that Trump's theories about illicit ballots held water. Multiple reviews, audits, recounts, and judicial examinations consistently affirmed Biden's legitimate victory. So why take possession of the ballots initially? What details lie within those files that Trump's advisors seem determined to shield? The judge ruled clearly, the public has a legitimate interest. By Tuesday, materials concerning the seizure must become accessible, free from unwarranted concealment. Openness prevails. This carries real weight for Trump. Some might shrug and say old files mean little now that he's won again in 2024 and holds office. But his entire political identity draws strength from the stolen election premise. It energized his supporters, contributed to January 6th, and sustains his movement. If forthcoming FBI materials discredit Georgia fraud allegations as overstated or baseless, the core storyline weakens. Doubt in one state invites doubt in others. Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, that poses a genuine challenge. His influence depends on a fired-up base convinced the system cheated them, keeping them engaged, donating, attending events, standing firm. But fresh evidence contradicting the narrative could prompt second thoughts among some. They might wonder if they've followed a misleading account. For Trump, whose strength lies in portraying himself as perpetually targeted by powerful forces, that erosion would strike at the root. The worst outcome for him would be confirmation that he simply lost and struggled to accept it without any grand plot against him. The implications spread wider. Experts note that contradictory findings could affect pending litigation, including civil matters, criminal probes, January 6th related cases, fake elector inquiries, and actions pressuring state officials. If records indicate Trump knew no substantial fraud existed yet promoted the opposite to challenge the result, it points to deliberate deception, not mere error. Attempting to subvert a valid election crosses into dangerous territory. This unfolds as Trump governs, advances policies, and strengthens control. Hardly accidental timing. The legal process moves forward relentlessly. The deadline arrives Tuesday, very soon. Once public, the information cannot be recalled. The judiciary continues delivering surprises. A federal court has mandated disclosure of FBI documents connected to the 2020 Georgia ballot seizure, set for release by Tuesday, February 10, 2026. The order explicitly limits any protective redactions, ensuring meaningful visibility. For Trump, this represents a serious moment. He has long maintained that massive fraud overturned his 2020 victory, especially in Georgia, insisting ballots were phony and processes corrupt. If the files demonstrate otherwise, showing his assertions inflated or inaccurate, it strikes directly at the foundation of his message. The effect reaches further. Skepticism about Georgia naturally extends to parallel claims in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin. The stolen election theory begins losing solidity. Timing adds intensity. Trump occupies the presidency again, pursuing his vision and solidifying authority. Yet a judge stands poised to release material that could highlight dishonesty on the precise grievance that returned him to power. Expect turbulence ahead. Why does this hold such importance? Accountability lies at the center. Trump has navigated past scrutiny through delays, appeals, and influence. This time, the court insists on clarity. No more evasion through secrecy. Our institutions retain strength. No office holder, even the current president, fully controls the narrative forever. Transparency retains value. At its core, this tests democratic principles. Did Trump seek to reverse a lawful defeat? If evidence confirms he understood the absence of fraud yet advanced a contrary story anyway, that exceeds routine political maneuvering. It challenges the bedrock of fair elections. Ignoring it risks normalizing deception, official pressure, unauthorized electors. Future leaders could follow suit, rendering elections symbolic rather than decisive. Trust stands equally at stake, not merely in Trump, but in shared reality. Countless Americans accept the stolen election account because he presented it convincingly, favoring his word above institutions or evidence. What follows when documents contradict him? Some may reflect and adjust. Others might reinforce denial, labeling the FBI tainted or the judge partisan. That divide deepens. Without agreement on basic facts, national conversation falters, progress stalls. Trump has widened that gap, positioning himself as the sole trustworthy source against a hostile array. With release imminent, we approach clarity on the depth of this fracture. Tuesday marks the turning point. Documents become public. Analysts will scrutinize every line. Critics will highlight damaging elements. Defenders will downplay or reject them. Should Georgia's record undermine Trump's version, expect intensified scrutiny, renewed calls for probes, congressional attention, possible shifts in public perception beyond his core group. Trump will respond forcefully, calling it persecution, questioning agency integrity, alleging judicial bias, rallying his supporters to dismiss findings. Many will follow that lead, preserving loyalty. His hold relies less on evidence alignment and more on sustained belief among followers. That base allows endurance through difficulty. Still, no narrative lasts indefinitely when reality diverges sharply. The gap widens until undeniable. Are we nearing that threshold? Hard to predict precisely. But this compelled disclosure brings us nearer than before to forcing confrontation with facts. I suspect neither Trump, his advisors, nor many supporters feel prepared. Readiness aside, the calendar advances. Tuesday arrives, files emerge. We learn what the FBI truly gathered on those Georgia ballots in 2020.